Welcome back to the Modern Day Away podcast, where we bring on the leaders and providers from our community to give you the opportunity to learn from what has got them where they are today. Today, I've got Jason Butner. Jason is a spiritual mentor of mine that has really become a close friend and life mentor. I cannot emphasize enough on the amount of respect I have for this man. He's a follower of Christ, husband, father of 6, 2 recently adopted, and has just been a successful business owner and worked about every job related to engineering you can imagine. And is also the master of sales. So Jason, brother, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
Dude, so we've done 2 deals together in the past year, and I've gotten to learn a ton from you in the process.
Which I think is funny that you say that. You're saying master of sales and you're learning from me. I'm like, you're the guy who helped me get it done. You know, it was, anyway, I'm sure we'll cover it in the podcast, but I learned a lot from you too. So,
yeah. Man, so tell me a little bit about your mentorship strategy, because you've been a mentor to me and you're just this fearless leader.
Okay, well, let me kind of absorb that for a second. But I mean, when I think of, I'm probably not the best strategist. You know, when you think about like, I've got 10 bullet points to how this is all supposed to work and we're at this stage, and you know, like I definitely don't view people in my life as like cattle that have to run through a process, right? Nobody likes being treated like that. I don't like it. We kind of all know when we're being treated like a project. You know, we're just people. And I guess, honestly, my strategy is just be a Christian and be the man that God wants me to be and listen to him. And I think Paul said, you know, in the Bible, he said, follow me as I follow Christ. And so maybe at the highest level of the strategy, it's just that, you know, and if I'm following Christ and I'm listening to him, then we're living life together. You know, you live in the neighborhood now. I think that gives us the opportunity to see each other more. A pop in is easier, you know, to just drop by, to share life, see how Axel's doing, your son, to, you know, be in cell group interacting with other guys, be at church interacting with we're learning in that process. We're doing deals together. You know, to me, it's not like, okay, where are we at in the stage right now? I'm not really analyzing that. I'm just praying for you when I pray, thanking God for you in my life and asking him if he'll give me insight. I had a guy tell me a long time ago, I was on a job site back when I was in engineering, you know, and I was on a construction site and, make sure this is in the right zone. So I was on a construction site and we just struck up a conversation, and he mentioned, what did he say? He said, I want to say this right. He said, if we would talk to God about others as much or more than we talk to others about God, he would show us amazing things. And so that's also kind of something I want to always do better in my life, is just speak to the Lord about those in my life and pray for my friends and my family. And then if God wants to show me something, then I trust that he'll do it, you know, and then we go from there.
Yeah. Listening to God, man. How do you hear his voice?
You just listen. I mean, he makes it clear. He's God. He created us, you know. He says in his word, my sheep hear my voice. They know me. And so, you know, also kind of a core tenet of my faith is to not have to strive and scratch and claw at faith, you know, and worry and fret all the time. And so I think God can make abundantly clear his voice to us if we're listening. You know, I think God's way of interacting with us in relationship is oftentimes more simple, and we want to make a religion and a process around it, you know? And so if we hunger for him in our heart and we take the time to spend with him, he'll make his voice clear. And the other thing is just like, okay, is that you or is this me in my head? Sometimes people think like that. A lot of times in our head, we complicate the message. We make it process oriented, all this stuff. I feel like God is just like, bam, he'll say something. And in a moment that's almost timeless, he's made the entire message clear to you. He doesn't lecture us.
It's not algebra.
No, it's just simple. 1 + 1 = 2. It's like simpler than that. And you just know. I mean, just last night in cell group, you know, the guys sitting around the fire, Connor was talking about how the Lord had moved on him to purchase this house. And he was driving past a house he's driven by hundreds, if not, over 1,000 times that was in the neighborhood. And God said, stop and look to your right. And within less than 30 or 40 days, he had bought that house, sold his other house to somebody who really needed it. And God orchestrated the entire thing. Mm-hmm. And it literally started with stop and look to your right. And then you guys became friends, and that attracted you to move into the neighborhood. Now you guys live a block and a half from one another. And it's like, look at the outflow of something that God spoke and stop, look to your right. I don't know, maybe 5 words. Mm-hmm. If you would even say it was words, it was just, he knew. And I think stories like that are so powerful.
It's a whisper. Mm-hmm. A whisper that if you acknowledge is there, can lead to all these blessings.
Yep. Yeah. And what was it? Elijah was running, and I think he was in a cave at one point, and there was a storm, there was an earthquake, there was all this noise and all this stuff. And it wasn't until he heard God's still small voice, like you said, it was almost like a whisper. You get that impression when you read the word that he heard God's still small voice. It really is like he doesn't have to shout at us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. And I think it translates to so many areas of life. And everything in life. Mm-hmm. Your actions should be a result of your faith. And following your faith in those actions is what's going to open up doors for so many people. Mm-hmm. You following in your faith and the advice you've been able to give me has made my marriage so much stronger. It's made our community for me and Lane so much stronger. And it's a result of your faith. Mm-hmm. And it's humbling.
Well, and then it's a result of your faith, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you see something there and you want, those different Sundays, Sunday after Sunday that we go grab lunch together, mm-hmm. Just Renee and I and you and Lane. You could have been like, I'm busy. In fact, you were busy. You were like, I've got to go at 1:00 and meet a client over here. And, if your priority was to be there at 1:00 and that caused you so much mental distress or whatever that you were like, we can't do this lunch, and all of a sudden you started prioritizing that. That's how you wake up one day, you're 30, 40, whatever years old, and you realize like everything is out of whack. My priorities are wrong. And a lot of times it's a wake up moment to that, and it's like it's a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. It's a slow burn, a slow decline. And I'm just really proud of you for, being in your 20s and saying, okay, I'm married. I think that's really important. I want to prioritize that. Where I live and the community of people that I'm sharing life with is really important, and I want to prioritize that. And obviously you're a provider, your business and all that, but I see you as a man who puts the Lord and your wife and your family and your community ahead of all that. And so it's no surprise that all this other success is following you, I
think paying attention to your vision is so important, and not your business vision, your life vision, mm-hmm. And how do I want my family to look? How do I want these other areas of my life that are really more important than my business, right? Because my business is going to fund these, but I have my business so that I can have these other areas of my life that I can serve other people and love other people in a way that the Lord would want me to. Mm-hmm. And watching how you've juggled it all. Having 6 kids, a full-time job. And not just that, you are constantly working in the church. You're constantly, the amount of things that you juggle on a day-to-day basis, I can't even imagine myself doing yet. And so the way you said it before is inspiring, because you just said you walk with the Lord. Mm-hmm. And for you to say you're proud of me for that, blows me up a little bit.
Good. Yeah. We should encourage one another, mm-hmm. Encourage, not to get all like whatever, but means to give heart. That word COUR is like a Latin root word for heart, like creve coeur. Mm-hmm. If you go by the bridge, it always struck me, the new bridge, it's not new anymore, but Anyway, it shows how old I am. The new bridge over 270 Olive Road. It's in Creve Coeur, but they have these little symbols of a heart that's torn, broken, because Creve Coeur means broken heart. And so courage is heart. So we should be giving each other heart. And I've always found that if you encourage somebody in an area, or somebody encourages me in an area, hey, great job, Jason. Like what you said today really made a difference or an impact there. All of a sudden I'm going home and I'm, loving on my wife better and my kids. Well, they didn't say anything about my wife and my kids, but they encouraged me here. And because they gave me heart, I was encouraged to go do other things that were impactful. Mm-hmm. So like, how powerful is that if we encourage one another in faith? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And walking with a community in the way that I'm learning to do has opened up doors to my business too. Like big time. I helped sell a church building with you a few months ago. Yeah. It was a blast to work with you the entire time. I mean, when I can't emphasize on that enough. We get to talk on the phone like every day. Mm-hmm. We don't get to do that anymore all the time.
We need some more deals.
Right? That's what I'm saying. We need to do some more deals. Yeah.
I don't have any more deals. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll find some.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the middle of that, I got to help you purchase your first piece of land.
Yeah. Tell
me about that.
I don't know which one to start with, but let's start with the land since it happened first, I guess. Mm-hmm. It was a dream of mine since I was 9 years old. I was out near Salem, Missouri. My mom was, dating who eventually became my stepdad. And we were out at this property. It was like 200-ish acres. And I remember for like a day and a half, I just ran all over that property and probably never touched the same place twice. And I just purposed in my heart, like, I want this someday. I loved it. It was like an anchor defining thing. And that never left. But also it's kind of like that whole thing. We'll just walk with the Lord and see, and sometimes we can make things happen or we can allow it to happen. And so it just, I didn't know what the clear path was to that until I discovered through a friend and cell group, TJ, mm-hmm. this idea of a self-directed IRA, who actually Kevin in church as well had been working with TJ on, and they were using it for investment properties. I was like, well, if you can buy an investment property with this, and essentially for the listeners out there, if they're wondering what it is, it's just a non-traditional investment vehicle that you could take an IRA that would typically be, invested in mutual funds or whatever, and you can do things like buy gold or it's self-directed, buy gold or invest in a business or buy land. And so I was like, whoa, I had an old 401k. When I left, the work world and started my own business, I cashed those 401ks out and put them in a traditional IRA. Then once I discovered this, put it into a self-directed IRA. And then we were talking, you and I, and I'm like, well, I've got this chunk of money here now. I could potentially use the land as an investment vehicle. And could we start looking? And so when I was even talking to TJ, it was kind of like, well, what could this look like? And we were both really interested in this area around Montauk because he has family kind of around the Current River area that has land out there as well. And he loves it. And, Montauk is cool because if you put like an Airbnb type of a situation out there, there's people that horseback ride throughout the year. There's fishermen throughout the year. And actually, there's a pretty decent amount of Airbnbs out there that stay rented pretty heavily. It's not just like a peak season in the summer, but, fishing can be in the early spring and all of that as well. So thinking about that, praying about that. What kind of a land situation do I want? I had some rules around it. It has to connect to the road. I don't want to do something with an easement where I'm dependent on somebody else's land and agreements. And I want more land than less land and, a house or things like so. There's just these certain kind of criteria, and I want to buy it somewhat low or at a reasonable, fair price. I'm not looking to buy something that's primo. Let's buy something that we can rehabilitate and invest in, and it grows. And so this land popped up on Facebook Marketplace, and I don't remember exactly how you and I initiated the conversation because it was for sale by owner. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to draw up documents and things like that. So I think we just started talking about it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, dude, I can help you with that. even though like traditionally you're not like a land broker, you're not out there in the rural areas buying and selling land. You're like, hey, I can at least help you get this deal done well. And so we started working on that. So interject at any point if you got some other things that you remember, but it was for sale, and I'll do some numbers here. It's fine. I don't care if this goes out public. It was for sale for $300,000 on Facebook Marketplace. I went out and looked at it, found out that the guy had pretty heavily logged it. I mean, it wasn't destroyed. It was just really heavily logged. And, the main field area had not really been fertilized or taken care of very well. There's thorns growing up everywhere. Honestly, I was getting excited. Like, I want to buy land that needs help, but at the same time, it's not primo value. So I had kind of told him, hey, if we're not in the 250 range somewhere, like, we're probably not talking. And so he was like, okay, let me think about it. Talk to my wife. In the meantime, he's talking to his wife. Another piece of land pops up really close to our other mutual friend, Mike McNeil. Primo, 24 acres, cozy little cottage. You know it. I mean, I wish I could show pictures on the podcast right now. It was like the most beautiful little 24 acres you could imagine.
Looked like a park.
Yeah. I mean, the stream running at the bottom of the hill, the kids could play in. Renee goes out there. She's like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Little cottage that just is perfectly adorned. You're saying all the decoration and furniture comes with it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, when you were looking at this as an investment, were you thinking like financial investment or invest in my family? I can bring my family out here and the kids are playing and enjoying it. So we talked to the agent. They're like, if you're in this range, it's probably yours. We're working up an offer. And all of a sudden somebody else another buyer gets involved and those numbers are no longer real. So there's escalation happening. And you remember how we structured that offer, but we eventually got to an offer that was like killer. How did we structure that?
Oh, man.
This is important for the story, I think.
Absolutely. So we structured that offer in a way where we absolutely should have got it. There's no reason that we shouldn't have got it. We went as is on a special sale contract versus a residential sale contract, which is it's a more aggressive offer. It's typically a form used for commercial deals. And we removed the inspection rider. So we kind of walked around, did a little bit of our own inspections. So we said we were going to go as is. And then we also,
is, no inspection rider.
And no financing contingency.
Cash.
And they ended up accepting an offer that was just a couple grand higher than what we were offering, that had about every contingency you can imagine in it. No seller in their right mind accepts that offer versus our offer.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a financed offer, I think, as well, wasn't it?
It was a financed offer.
Yeah. And honestly, I think at that time, obviously we're praying, and I was like, if this doesn't get accepted, it's just a real sign from the Lord that this wasn't meant to be. Didn't get accepted. And it was like perfect peace. I remember calling you. It's kind of like, well, where do we go from here? And I was like, I think I just sit. Because I could have called the original guy back down by Montauk. The land was everything that we talked about. Close to Montauk, connected to the highway, more land, 84 acres. It needed help. It was, it was all the original stuff, but this awesome, plus the 24 acres, it was all manicured and beautiful, was right next to Mike's property. So in a sense, he's got, at the time, close to 1,000 acres. You're buying 24, but you have like almost 1,000 acres to go run on. And, you're next to, more importantly, you're next to your dearest friends in life. And, so it's just like, okay, it got us going that way. Do I slam back to the original guy? I thought, no, let's just sit. Lo and behold, almost 2 weeks later, he calls back and is like, hey man, like, I've got these other guys calling me about this land. But to tell you the truth, I don't want to sell it to them. I like you. I want to sell it to you. And whether he was blowing smoke or whatever, but he did give some specifics. He's like, they're just kind of hard driving. One guy's with Boeing. Like, he's just like, wanting to do, he's pushing me and kind of like, I feel like I'm being driven here in the process. And I just liked that it was very laid back with you and me. And I liked your vision for it. So I'd shared with him that I want to bring out youth and give them awesome experiences to hunt. And we kind of joke about how I want it to be, I don't even remember what people call it now. They call it adventure thrill land, but I wanted it to be epic adventures, for these kids and other people I'd take out there. Anyway, he says, I want to work with you. And I said, well, the crazy thing is I've been talking to my realtor and he's been running some comps. And, the more we've looked at it, even that 250 range is really not a fair range for this property. It's got to be lower. And I kind of hated doing that because I don't like really negotiating with people and making them feel bad about, it's just probably a weakness of mine. But anyway, at the same time, I wasn't going to buy the land at a premium. And so we were haggling a little bit more. That's not really true. Just looking at numbers, you'd give me the comps. And we got to a number and you said I remember you texted me. And I was trying to pull up the text last night. We've been texting a lot because we've been doing all these deals. Yeah. We've been doing stuff and I'm like, holy cow, that was but I was trying to find the text where you said, just sit, just say the number and sit. And I had not had a lot of experience with you at this point. How good is Sam really? What, his negotiation tactics, how much I think I was learning. I told you I learned from you, learn to trust. I'm not a realtor. I'm not a professional buyer. I'm not good at this process. This is what this guy does. It's like, okay, I'm going to put the number out and I'm just going to sit. You even advised me kind of how to write the text. Did it. And it was like a day goes by. I'm like, he's upset, whatever. Anyway, he texts back. He says, let's go. All right. He called back. He said, let's do it. $231,000, $69,000 less than the original that was put on. While people are buying homes right now for $70,000 over asking price, I bought that land $70,000 under the initial asking price, and it's been amazing ever since. But that's all the fun stuff is what we're doing on the land now. But
and the Lord works in real estate, and I tell everybody that, and they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, no, I'm not, because it's a huge financial decision, for one, and in making huge decisions. The Lord works in little decisions. Mm-hmm. This is a big decision. Of course, he's going to act in that. And so for you not to get that first property, that was,
right.
From a contract person's perspective, like my own, it was crazy. There's no reason that should have happened.
But neither of us were really surprised because we just knew that God was in it.
Exactly.
We had been praying and, we were going to keep our peace throughout the process. And I think we mutually encouraged one another. There's times I'm like, and I could tell that you had your piece. And there's times that I think you were kind of like ready to make a move. And I was like, and actually to tell you the truth, we were so in sync because when I was like, no, let's just wait. Let's sit. You were like, I think that's the right decision, and, but actually I was talking to Steve, who you introduced me to last night. And, you helped him get into his new house and all that. And he said he had shared almost the same story. Sam knew the number and he goes, we were talking about just like words of knowledge. God gives us gifts of words of knowledge. He can give us knowledge. And I think he's given you a gift of, knowing the number sometimes and just sitting. Right.
I feel like he gives me numbers. Mm-hmm. He does. It's a lot of it's in the statistics behind it and knowing a market really well. Mm-hmm. But he definitely gives me numbers.
Yeah, but knowing the market, pulling all these comps, having spreadsheets and all this data out there, like you can still just go crazy. And, and we can get into the other deal as well, but you also just have a calm about you, peace. And when you're kind of like, the number, it's like, let's sit. And that's a gift. So it's not just like, how do you arrive at it? And some of it might come through your expertise, the research you're doing, the team you've got around you that's helping you gather that research, all of that, your previous deals and negotiation tactics. But like at some point you just have to lock in. And like you said, they're big decisions. You could lose certain deals if you're cocky about the number and, and so it's a big deal when you finally hit that where it's like, this is where we're either going to get it or not. Let's lock in. Mm-hmm. And I think that leadership you provide into the deal for your customers out there is probably a big deal for them. And keeping the process simple and, just that thing we talked about earlier, follow me as I follow Christ. Like a lot of people, when you're providing a service to them, obviously you want them to be a part of that exploration, that journey, that, getting to the value that they want to get. They want to be a part of that process, but they're also looking to be led, And so how do you consult in a way and provide value in a way where you're involving them, and it's very interactive and all of that. But they also know I'm working with a strong leader here who at some point is going to say, you know, hey, this is where we need to go, or this is the next step. And you're confident, but not cocky. And I think that's a big deal. And you've got that.
Well, thank you for that. And the Lord works in real estate. I'll say it again. You know, it's
He works in everything.
In everything. In everything. He really does. And being at peace throughout the transaction, if you don't get it, you weren't meant to have it. And if you have that number, and the Lord has given you that number and you don't get it, you shouldn't be disappointed. You should be thankful.
That's right. And I am thankful. I mean, the cozy cottage was beautiful and everything like that. But I've had my boys out on the 84 acres 5 times now. They love it. They're always, Daddy, when are we going out to the property again? And my neighbors are awesome. I've got one neighbor, he gets the drone up there and he flies and he'll like take pictures and video of it and let me know different things that are happening. And we did a burn on the land, so he took some video of the burn, and then when it started re-greening up, he went back out and showed me how green it was getting. And he's just a cool guy. And I got another neighbor on the other side who we met last weekend or 2 weekends ago out there, and he and his son drove me and my dad around. And after a little bit of conversation, he's going to go put lime and fertilizer on my 33-acre bottom field. He's going to grow it up to, replant, reseed this fall and get food grade, hay coming up. I told him, you plant whatever you want. I mean, it's for your cows, right? So you figure out what you want to put out there. I'm not going to dictate to you. I'm not going to charge you. Put in a little gate right here. Come in when you need to do your work on it. And I told him kind of my vision for just wanting to, get these folks out there, friends and some of these youth, to bow hunt and have a epic experience, and my kids are already having epic experiences out there. It's awesome. And I'm just taking joy in it. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what, man? I got 340 acres over here. You can hunt it whenever you want. I'm not really into bow hunting. I get into turkey hunting a lot, but don't even call. Don't even worry about texting, nothing. You just come on in and you hunt wherever you want in here. So I bought 84 acres, and now I've got like over 400 acres I can hunt. And then he texted me the other day and is like, oh, by the way, if you want to stay out here, there's my mom's land up north. There's another about 300 acres. You can go stay up in this cabin that's up there until you get yours done. And then like you can even hunt that land. And like, it's just like you said, when you're praying through the process, you just, you can't predict these things. You can't know everything. And sometimes God just surprises you and blesses you in a way that you had no idea he was going to. So I'm just so happy, I'm not upset or sad or whatever that we lost the one. It was a cool opportunity. God had something else in store.
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't just say that because of that one that we didn't get. It's just all the market we're in right now, man. I mean, when there's 10 offers on a house, you put your best foot forward. If you don't get it, you got to be at peace. There's going to be other opportunities. And I think this is a great example of that because you didn't get that other one, but that's because the Lord has something better for you.
Man.
And I mean, you're 100 acres turned into 700 acres in the blink of an eye.
Yep. I mean, it's crazy. And you've got all these clients that you're working with. And it does have to be tough for them to see. I've talked personally with people who, you put a strong offer in on a house that you really want and you don't get it. It can be heartbreaking. And, I've worked with different real estate agents in the past, but I've never worked with an agent that's a believer, number one, and that, this conversation we're having. So to have that is like an unmeasurable value in the process too, to say, hey, chill. We got, any real estate agent can say, chill, relax. We're going to go after the next one, But to have that, it's one thing to make it up and to be convincing someone to relax and be at peace. It's another to say, I have an anchor for my peace, and the Lord closed this door, and the word says that there's a door that if the Lord opens it, no man can close it. And if the Lord closes it, no man can open it. And so we know on the other side of that door that God opens is a room that gets a lot bigger. And that's really cool. That's true. We're not making that up. We've seen it. We know it. And so for you to guide your clients through that process, and, you can speak be at peace, relax, and all that, but you have to be at peace. And so you have that anchor, you have that peace. And hopefully that transfers to your clients as you go through those situations,
I sure hope it does.
Sure it does.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way it transfers. You got to, I always screw up this statement, but a spiritual grandfather to me who just passed away recently, Charles Simpson, would say, and I need to look it up, but you can preach measles all day long, but if you got the mumps, the people are going to break out in spots. And maybe again, that's backwards. You guys can fact check me. Okay. But you get it. You can say whatever you want, but if something's in you, that's what the people are going to get. We only reproduce what we are. I mean, if an apple drops to the ground and the seed goes in the ground, an orange tree's not coming up. Like we reproduce out in the world who we are and what we are. And that's what you bring to your deals and to your clients is who you are, not just what you say.
And being a new father, I keep feeling that you reproduce who you are. And
what you literally did.
Yes.
Your
yes,
DNA, but
it's creating individuals that can follow Christ, can be leaders in their community, that can, take what they're seeing in your actions and respect it, and then translate that to the rest of their lives. Yeah.
Well, that's what, there's all of this stuff is how discipleship happens through life, just the living of life. Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples. Our pastor Pete, he's pointed out in times past that word go, there can be like, look, go to India and make disciples, or go to wherever, and that indicates I'm on a mission. I have purposed in my mind, I am going to go and make disciples. But that word can also mean going. As you are going, make disciples. And like all this stuff we're talking about here is that as you're going, so whether it's your friendships and relationships, and certainly your kids should be your first disciple making priority, Am I gonna, I don't even think the question is, am I going to reproduce who I am into my child, into little Axel? It's what is, you are going to reproduce into him who you are. It's what's in you then at that point. And so, again, it's not complicated. We know we can take an inventory. The word of God says it's like a two-edged, sharper than a two-edged sword. It pierces through bone and joint and marrow, and it gets to the innermost thoughts and motives of the heart and exposes them. 1 Corinthians 4 talks about don't judge another person's motives before due time. In the end times, they'll all be revealed, And then in that verse that I just, described, where the word of God is sharper than a two-edged sword, it pierces through joint and marrow. It gets to the center of your thoughts and intentions and motives. And it does mention the end time that God will expose. And, that's a good thing, because we can get into the word of God and we can talk to him. It says Jesus is the word, in John 1. And so we can both get into the word of God, which is living and active, and we can spend time with Jesus, who is the word embodied, and he will expose the intentions and thoughts of our heart. So even if we're kind of like not self-aware at times, and I can attest to that. Sometimes I'm just off message. I'm off point. I am unaware of the dolt that I'm being to my wife or my kids or this or that, or in business or whatever, my friendships. And God can even expose all that. And you want him to. I don't want to be an unaware dolt, And so at that point, it's like, okay, who am I? What am I? What's the substance of this man right here? Because that's what's going to go into your child, Yeah. And that's a scary thought in a way, but it's actually a really good thought, because we got a good God who can help us navigate all that.
In asking him for advice, who do you need me to be?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that I mentioned Charles Simpson earlier, and so I'm reading a book of his called, it's about prayer. I don't remember the title right now. I just started it this morning in my quiet time, and 21 questions about prayer, it's called. But the second chapter in it is who is this one that I'm about to talk to? And he said every morning when he'd spend time with the Lord, he'd just ponder that before he just ripped in and started talking to God. Like, what is this mind like that I'm going to talk to? Who is God really? Isaiah says his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And if you just think about that for a moment before you rush in. And Jesus, when he taught us how to pray, he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Like, just acknowledging who God is before you just rip in and start asking him requests and all this stuff. And it just, I think to ponder and ask God who he is and ponder on that goes a long way into him forming who we are, and telling us who we are and who he created us to be, and unlocking that in each individual who he did make fearfully and wonderfully. He's got a special thought for you and special thought for me, and made you a certain way, made me a different way. That's evident. But like, just seeing that we're all different is the start, but then living that, And anyway, I've had a lot of coffee. I'm just talking a lot here. But
No, I love it. You're just dropping golden nuggets. And
who is she? Who is he? We'll do this then. Who has he shown you that you are? A core thing.
A core thing for who I am. I feel like he speaks in so many different areas of life where he wants you to be a different core individual in different areas of life. Ultimately, he wants you to be a leader that leads by example in faith. And he wants you to correlate that to every area of your life. And so as long as I'm being a leader by example and not pushing somebody in one way, but acting a totally different way myself, then at that point, I can translate it to everything. And I watch you do it all the time. It's a beautiful example. You are so strong in your faith that it directly correlates to every other aspect of your life and affects so many people in so many positive ways. And it might not feel positive to them at the moment, because when you're holding somebody accountable, that can kind of throw a twist in their life. And being able to be held accountable, which is something that I've personally been super focused on for the past, 4 years or so, was how can you got to put yourself in a humble position to be held accountable. And if you can't be held accountable, you're not going to learn. You're not going to progress. You're not going to listen the way you need to listen. It's going to affect your faith. It's going to affect your friendships. It's going to affect your family, all in a negative way, because you're not open to growth. And as long as you can stay humble and be a leader that leads by example, open to accountability, I think the Lord is going to work in your life in ways that are going to bless so many people.
So you talked about humility, open to growth. It's teachable. And those are things that are easy to talk about, but in the moment that you're failing, somebody's confronting you about it, it's just so easy to, you could push back, you could argue, could lie, could manage the story. You could, there's just so many things, that are tempting in that moment. You're touching on things that like literally are holding millions and millions of us all back every day, where we limit ourselves. Praise God that he would put somebody in our lives who would speak into our life. But then do we limit ourselves, And I've been confronted before. And honestly, growing up, without getting into too much of the nitty-gritty about it all, I didn't have, and I don't want to dishonor anybody who's in my life as a man or as a father figure or anything like that, but I just, sometimes like when those who were a father or a father figure in my life would be upset with me, they were just upset in the moment. They were upset, and I didn't have a lot of that, like, Andy Griffith kind of like, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about what you did wrong here, son, and, you're receiving like healthy discipline. And when I first was a Christian, I got saved March 31st, 1999. at a rap concert of all things. I was supposed to be in a wrestling tournament in Rolla. I was in peak physical condition. I'm not like the world's best wrestler, but I thought I was going to go pretty far and do all right. And I got wrapped up like a basket in round 1. And so initially I thought all weekend I was going to be wrestling. And then I'm like, well, I got nothing left to do. I'm not going to sit around here and watch everybody else wrestle. So a bunch of my buddies were going to this concert. And I'll make this story a little bit shorter because it's not really about this, but I ended up at this concert, and I was not intending to talk with the Lord. I was intending to go to a rap concert. But I was a little bit like frustrated that, just overall, not that I really wanted to be there. I'd rather been going deep in the wrestling tournament. And, we're at what was called the Keel. I don't even know what they call it anymore downtown in St. Louis. I went to school in Rolla. And so I'm with these guys. And at one point in the concert, there's this celebration of sin, celebration of, hey, all you, dope smokers out there slinging drugs and doing this and that. And like, running your game and all this. I mean, I hate to like put it like that. I mean, that makes me sound kind of whatever, but like it was Jay-Z, Method Man, Redman, and DMX. And they were just, throwing it down, and the strobe lights were like, the bass was going. They're like, hold your lighters up high and proud, and like, I looked around and I just realized everything. Like if you've heard of like bloodlust, like there was a frenzy, like a fish frenzy or something you'd see if you're out fishing, and it just is like a phenomenon where everybody's just going nuts. I mean, they were going wild, like all celebrating the bad stuff, not the good stuff. And I looked around, and all of a sudden in this moment, I realized I had a dream about this when I was 17. I was actually on house arrest in my house, and I was having kind of almost like a dream in the middle of the day, and this exact situation was happening, and it got my attention. Whoa, this isn't like that dream. This is that dream. And I felt the Lord appear in that moment, actually kind of up into my left, which sounds weird to say, but it was like he was right there. Jesus, he was there. It wasn't like it. And I sensed the Lord ask me, do you like your life? And not in this sense, like, do you like your life? But just like in his words, I was like, this isn't life. There's nothing alive about this. This is actually like death. And so my answer back to the Lord in the Spirit was no. And I felt him extend his hand and just say, follow me. And in that moment, I just felt compelled, felt, yes, I want to go toward life. You are alive in this arena of darkness. You're the only living thing here, and like, so I just went toward the Lord, and it wasn't in that moment lightning bolts and fireworks and, rainbows and unicorns and all this, like really like I wasn't flush with positive emotion. In fact, my next memory of it, and I'm, it's been so many years, I'm kind of losing my memories, but my next memory was being in a White Castle eating like a crave case or whatever. And my friends being like, hey man, come on, like what's going on with you? What's wrong with you? And I was just like contemplating what is going on right now. And I said, go ahead and go, do whatever for the rest of the night. I'm going to go to my aunt's house. And my aunt lived, this was at like Manchester and Big Ben and Maplewood. And my aunt lived just down Manchester in like Rock Hill. And she was the only one in my family I knew who was like a solid Christian, went to church, read her Bible, prayed, loved me, loved Jesus. So I just was like, I need to go to her, and knocked on her door. And she just knew instantly that the Lord had gotten me. I mean, it was like spiritually almost, she could see it. And we just reveled in the Lord together, and she began discipling me. And so I just went to Christ the King Church because that's where she went. And I met our pastor there, Pete, and got to know him more and more. And he became, the whole reason I'm telling this story is because he became like a father figure to me, and there were times where he would confront me. I remember one time he expressed displeasure toward me one time, that he was like, oh man, he didn't say, oh man, I was trying to bring somebody that I brought to church into a meeting that we had before church. And he was like, well, that person can wait outside the room. And I felt like, well, that's kind of rude to make him wait outside the room. But he was like, well, you knew you had this meeting. And so you got to figure that out, Jason. Go figure it out. But, I got to get back to the meeting here. And I was really frustrated. And after church, he came up to me and he was, kind of like, hey, that really fried my Krispies back there. And we joke to this day about what the heck does fried your Krispies mean? I was in the moment, I was kind of like, I know what that means, but I've never heard that before. I knew he was upset, and we talked for just a moment, and he was like, hey, you want to go grab lunch? In that moment, Sam, I'd never had a man confront me about something I had done wrong and then want to go out and get lunch afterwards. That's crazy, right? I'm 20, whatever years old at this point. And I had just been reading in Hebrews 12 about no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness. And it's talking about how the Father disciplines his children in Hebrews 12. I had just been reading that, and I'm like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what a father does, And I just committed at that moment, like, this is the most valuable thing. I need this so bad in my life. I need a father. I need someone like Pete. And I just, every time I take an inventory of my life, I just think, am I listening to him enough? Am I going to him enough? Am I bouncing ideas off of him enough? Am I allowing him to have influence in my life enough to make me into the disciple that God wants me to be? And I have not been, and so I need to continue to reevaluate that. And, while I'm sitting here and you're in my cell group and the whole mission is to make disciples and to grow together, like, I am looking to Pete. Pete is looking, follow me as I follow the Lord. And that's the same commission I have with Pete. I'm following him as he follows the Lord, allowing him to build his DNA into me, and so, but yeah, we were talking about discipline, and, it's not pleasant at the time, but it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's in those moments, like, am I going to fight back, or am I going to accept this and hunger for it and grow through it? And, that was a good example. I know there's times I'm like, but.
That's a great example. And having the heart to listen. And I think that does come from a humble place where the Lord wants you to be. And I think if you're trying to walk with him, he's going to put that humility on you. And it might not be immediately. Mm-hmm. It may come afterwards.
Right.
It may come in the weeks to follow, the months to follow.
Yeah.
But he's going to put something on your heart, and it's going to molder, right? Like a fire that's just kind of, starting to crackle a little bit. And then this wind comes through and it lights up. And now you're a flame. And how can you spark that flame? And I think it comes through, one, obviously walking with the Lord, but having relationships with people around you that can speak into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think harping on community is so important, because if you don't have that community, if you don't have those people around you that you look up to, you're going to eventually stumble, and you got to have somebody behind you to catch you,
right?
But not just catch you, point you in the right direction in a way.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Keep you out of the ditch. But if you drive into the ditch anyway, they'll pull you out, dust you off, keep you going. It is powerful. Yeah. I wonder at how many people don't have that in their lives. And I don't rejoice for a moment thinking that there are people who are isolated, but I know that we are not. We have our brothers and sisters in Christ, but in our cell group, we have our brothers in Christ, and I know that we would bail each other out. We would love one another. If any of us are caught in sin or there's something that we're overtaken by, we're going to gently restore one another. We're going to listen to one another. We're going to show up if a tree falls down over a guy's fence. I didn't show up actually on that one, but several of you guys did.
I actually didn't either. I was about to go, and then I saw a picture, and there was
Justin.
There was already 8 guys over there, and they knocked it out in like 30 minutes. And so 8 chainsaws.
Well, yeah, that's the beauty is sometimes you do that and you show up. Actually, I did drive out there, and those guys, they were already gone. Or it was that day or it was another. Anyway, the point is how many times have you shown up and the work is done because so many guys show up for the move day or this or that? It's awesome. It's just awesome. And, any one of us at any time can be like, hey, do you have time in the next week or two to just go grab lunch or breakfast or coffee? Want to talk about some things, and without a shadow of a doubt, like that person's going to make time. And again, I don't want to think that there's people out there who are isolated, but I just know my own tendencies as a man. The more I'm hurting, the more I'm overloaded in life, the more I'm frustrated at others or myself, more things aren't going well at work or whatever. For some dumb reason, I tend to isolate, and I don't know, almost the older I get, I just kind of notice like, and I don't know if that's the busyness of life. You've got your marriage, your kids. I have 6 kids now. You got all these things, and all of a sudden you go like, I haven't tended to my friendships well, or I haven't stayed plugged in well, and at the end of every day, I might be tired. And the coolest thought is to just sit down on the couch and watch a show on Netflix. That's what I want to do today. I don't want to go out of my house and go meet with somebody. I don't want to have that interaction. I just want to unplug and unwind. And that can be there's nothing wrong with that. But you wake up one day and you go, man, I've kind of been isolating myself. And that can happen too. And, but you just keep pointing it back to the power of community and discipleship.
And for people who are out there and may not have that community and have this, I would be jealous personally if I didn't have that community in a way. And you shouldn't be. This is an opportunity for you to go out and find a community for you to be involved in, for you to bring value to in a way, but for you to ultimately be able to rejoice and be a part of something that's more than just yourself. It's almost selfish, but it's not, because you can be selfless in it in so many ways.
This is a whole other string for another podcast or something or whatever, a conversation, but God gives us things that we want, and we can turn those things terrible, or we can use them the right way, gives us a desire for sex and we procreate, we make a family. He gives us a desire for food and the taste is good and it feeds our body. Is it wrong to desire delicious food or to desire a relationship with your wife? It's no. But then you can go and use it in really nasty and terrible ways, and we can become obese, or we can go have promiscuous sexual relationships or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not what God intended. We're just, C.S. Lewis likened it to putting the food in your mouth and spitting it out. You never get the benefit of it, And so, but at the same time, don't acknowledge, we don't have to act all falsely pious and be like, oh, everything should be displeasure and that God shouldn't give us pleasure. And so, yeah, like when you say it's almost like selfish to say I crave community and I want it and I want all the benefits of it, there's nothing wrong with that, right? We can also turn ingrown in a cell group and in a community, and it's locked out. Nobody else can break into that community because it's like an ingrown toenail. We always talk about that in cell. Nobody likes an ingrown toenail. It stinks, it festers, it hurts. It's like, it's just wrong. And so community can exist for the sake of community, and we worship community. And all of a sudden it's like that toenail is turning in on itself. And somebody comes and knocks on your door that wants to be in it. They see how good it is, but we're just like, it's our community. And so it's great to richly enjoy it and invite others into it.
Open door,
man.
Open door.
Yep.
I love that. And being in a community that has an open door for people who might want to come to the cell group, which is our house church on Wednesday nights, and being able to bring guys there and for them to just see the way that we all interact with each other, the conversations that flow. And even if, we're not talking that much as far as like other people, you're leading the group, but we're all laughing together. We're all, in conversations that we can all relate to because of the way that it's, being led. And this is fun.
I'm glad you think so. I mean, that's honestly, I just, when I go to cell at Core Cell, and Renee and I was like, we get to get in the car together and drive, and then we get to go be with those who we're closest with, and we get to learn and grow together and worship God together. And it's exciting. And I always wonder, I'm just pray to God sometimes, are the guys in cell, like, where are we at? The guys like being there. So it's always cool to hear that. And there are certain, like you said, some Wednesdays we get together, and like last night, I felt like it's time to open the Bible and get in. That message was so good.
Mm-hmm.
God is the possessor of all of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what does that mean about faithfulness, living faithfully as stewards of what he's given us? Oh, time to get into the Bible, and then who knows, next Wednesday, it's like, how's things going, man? How's work going? And we can jam for an hour and we're just catching up, and you just kind of go by feel. And, that could again be looked at as not very religiously beneficial, not very discipleship oriented.
Whiskey Wednesday.
That's right. Yeah. So if any of you are out there, Whiskey Wednesdays, what do we do that maybe once a month? It's informal.
Give or take.
Yep.
Give or take.
It's just, you're probably getting the picture that it's a great group of guys, and we just enjoy being together, and it is an open door, and it's definitely pointed in the direction of discipleship, to become better disciples and make disciples. And the mission is to make disciples who make disciples. And you are doing that, so that's my mission, is to make disciples who make disciples. And, you're always seeking to invest in those relationships in your life. Think about it. We did an inventory one time years ago in cell group. We should do it again. It was like, how many people are in your life that you influence? And I don't mean the Instagram influencer. I'm not looking down on them. I mean, we're on a podcast right now, but there is this mentality like, I'm an influencer, and but there's something that's not wrong about thinking about that. Again, Charles Simpson has a whole sermon series on your sphere of influence. And he talks about what we do when we go outside of that sphere and we're trying to influence people. And it gets really weird. And then being really aware of who God has put in your life. And some people that God's put in your life are jamming, you're just like, they want to learn, and you're learning together, and other people are just there, and you're like, why are you in my life? You don't listen to me, you don't learn, you don't whatever, but he even says, when people are in your life, just treat them like they're in your life, and you're not too sure, just treat them like that. Build bridges of relationship that can withstand truth and confrontation, so focus on the mooring, the foundation of that bridge. Invest in that so that when it comes time to put heavy truth on it, it doesn't crumble and break, and the truth can get across the bridge from you to them. And so it's just that sphere of influence. We do have influence on people's lives. And so we did this exercise. How many people do you influence in your life? How many people are in your life? And when you have guys like you, where you have a business, and this business has, your clients, and then a podcast like this that, maybe many people are listening to, you wonder, and I remember one time we counted up, it was like 10,000 people out of our little humble cell group alone are being touched on a somewhat periodic basis by the small group of guys in our cell group, which is, 10 or so guys. 10 or so guys are touching up to 10,000 people on a somewhat periodic basis in some manner, shape, or form. And that just blows you away then, So it's not something to be like, we look at big things, Walmart, big business, big success, Uber, blah, 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 whatever, probably dumb example, Google, Apple, all these big companies out there, Elon Musk, all this, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we can worship it and then miss the fact that making disciples, one person at a time, is a world-winning strategy. If you think about it,
I like to think about it as like a leak. If you had like a little plumbing leak, like a tiny little one.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, so have I plenty of times.
We have some little leaks we're dealing with right now.
And so it might not look like much, right? Mm-hmm. You go there and there's just a drop every 2 minutes, but you go 12 hours in, you get a drop every 2 minutes. Now you got a puddle and you got to replace the floor. But it's an impact is what I'm getting at. a small drop at a time.
Okay. I like your example. I get your example. Nobody wants a leak.
Nobody wants a leak.
But you're talking about it's a little bit. It adds up over time and makes an influence. Yeah.
That might have been a bad example, but I feel like it correlates in a way in my mind somehow.
It totally correlates. Yeah. Yeah. But that's right. Yeah. It really does. And I mean, again, we could probably take some time to break that down into things that we've seen that where wars in the world have broken out because the church is split, because there's not a coherent, not to get Pete could expound on this more deeply and eloquently, but in the 1830s, the church was split north and south in the United States. You can't raise an army if the people who are going to go fight don't believe that when they die, that the cause that they're fighting for is just. Mm-hmm. If they think they're going to hell, they're not going to fight, right? If they don't know where to fight, they have to believe that what they're fighting for is just and that God will judge them positively. I mean, we don't think about that when people go to war. Right now, we look at Ukraine and we hear these reports that Putin is threatening soldiers that if they retreat, they're going to be dishonored, jailed, or worse. Who knows, right? You've seen that in war where people lose their resolve to fight. We saw it in World War II where, like, if you retreated, you got shot. Like, that is a sign of somebody who no longer believes in the cause and they don't believe dying for that cause is worth it. And so you have to believe that going to fight in this battle is both a just cause to win, and if you die in the process of pursuing it, that God will judge you positively. So how did the church in the United States have two groups of people on a massive basis that both believed their cause was just and right? There was a split, and it went back to the 1830s, that the church could have united North and South. And we're seeing the same thing right now in the United States. It's almost more like rural urban. You almost see like an urban church that believes in all this, like, this social justice stuff. And then the rural church has got all these different things they believe in politically. I mean, it's clear as day. You see rainbow flags at the urban churches, and you see the churches out in the rural areas saying we shouldn't be murdering babies in the womb. And, there's these different splits, and then, so it worries me that the church is split again. But anyway, in the 1830s, it's like, then you get to 1865 and you got a nation at war. Could that have been prevented? In England, it was. There was no civil war. The church was united. There was more unity in the church about the issue of slavery, and the nation didn't have to go to war, and people didn't have to die. And so you look at, like, why am I saying that? Well, discipleship is where it happens. Discipleship is where it happens. We can't despise. It's not going to be the next church program that saves the United States or saves any of this stuff. It's not going to be how fancy are this ministry or that ministry or this food drive or whatever. I mean, those things aren't to be despised. They're not wrong. They're activities we do in church. But if we're not tending to making disciples, we're going to lack unity as a church. And when the church lacks unity, nations lack unity. And I think Satan will take advantage of that. And he's done it during World War II. You saw division in the church in Germany. Obviously, the Civil War, like I mentioned, and it concerns me that right now in the United States, we have a divided church. So I'm like, even more, I'm like, all right, let's double down. Let's go make disciples wherever we can find, like, not in some weird, again, strategy kind of a thing. When I say it's a world-winning strategy, I just mean it. I mean, you can win a heart and mind of somebody toward Jesus. And what is so wrong with that? It's the other thing we're being told all the time. It's so bigoted. It's so weird. Why is it bigoted? Jesus loved people. There was a prostitute in the Bible, Mary, who he saved from being stoned. That's the God I follow, but somehow the world is saying Christians are hateful bigots. And I'm just like, no, I think, the evil one has just been out there clouding people's minds. And, he wants people to think that Christians are mean and terrible and bigoted. And, in some cases, we've probably proven their hypothesis right by being somewhat mean at times or argumentative or whatever. But, like, at the core, what is wrong with following Jesus and being converted into his image and living for him? And if we would do that, not only do we have a destiny in heaven to be with him in unity together as people, but we can love on one another and be like him here on earth toward one another. And that's a good thing. So, and if we can do that, the way he's told us to do it in Matthew 28 is to just go make disciples. Don't worry about the big, just there's somebody in your life right now who you can share life with. Go do it.
And how you love people through that is so important.
Yeah.
Because what does the Bible say about love, right? Tell me.
A lot.
Yeah. But what would you say like the main, love is patient.
Yeah.
Love is kind.
Yeah.
Love is honest.
Yep.
And love can hurt. And
tough love.
Yeah. Love can hurt in some ways. And when I say it like that, I mean, if you're loving somebody, right? When I say that, I mean, like, if you're ministering to someone who might have a hard heart from something in the past, and you have to be gentle with that communication. And something that I admire so much about you is how gentle you are with people in the way that you love them. And you've got this unique ability to be with somebody in that, but then tell them what's right and tell them what's wrong as well. And that's going to get somebody's gears turning in a way that many other forms wouldn't be able to. Because if you just straight up tell somebody, and you're fierce about it, they're going to fight back. Because when you fight fire with fire, what happens?
You're more fire. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gets really fiery.
Gets really fiery. But
things break, things burn. Yeah.
Things burn.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, in Galatians 6, it talks about if one of your brothers is overtaken by sin, restore him gently, lest the same temptation beset you. And I think about that, and I'm just like, I know myself. I know my thoughts any given day. So this thing my brother's going through, like, yeah, it looks bad. He did the wrong thing. He's thinking wrong, whatever. Well, first of all, I know in my weak moments what I think, the temptations I have, and so you got to remember that. I need to remember that. And number two is, not to get into like the theology of sin necessarily, but there's like willful sin and sins of weakness, sins of willfulness and sins of weakness. And, I think there is a big difference, and we don't always have dispensation or knowledge. We don't always know when our brother is willfully sinning or sinning out of weakness. But in that word in Greek for if any of your brothers is overtaken by a sin, it's the same word used when you're running in a race. And again, this is something Pete's taught. If you're running in a race and you're in first place, you're trying to stay in first place, but there's a guy closing in on you and he just passes you. You're not trying to lose. You're trying like with all your might. I mean, that's it. Like the finish line is coming and he just passes you. You can be overtaken by sin. You could be trying not to sin. You're being tempted. You're weak. You're tired. You're hungry. You just had a fight with your wife or something and you got overtaken. Now, the guy who willfully is like, screw this, I'm going to go sin. I know what I'm doing, eyes wide open, and I'm choosing to do it. You don't know the motive between those two situations, those guys' hearts in those two situations. All you see is the fact that they both did the same thing. But Galatians 6 tells us to just restore that person gently, lest the same thing happen to you. So it's like, yeah, we have to be understanding with one another. We have to understand our own weaknesses. And, you talked about being direct though. Like we're not doing our brothers any service if we're just dancing around the subject and tiptoeing and we're worried about hurting their feelings or, and I can tend to do that too sometimes, because you also do question the strength of that relationship. going back to the bridge, there's a bridge of relationship between you and me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it is as strong as it is at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's based on how much you and I have invested in the strength of that relationship. And so that bridge is going to carry a weight of truth that I place on it. If you and I get into a very serious conversation about something that's really heavy in life, and I'm conveying a thought to you that's really heavy, and I put that confrontation down on that bridge and I need to push it across and get it to you, is that bridge going to crumble? And so sometimes you're too gentle, or I can be too gentle. I'm not sure if the bridge is strong enough. Is it going to break? So we start dancing around the subject and not really confronting the subject. So how do you know to be confident enough that, hey, and it may crumble, but you tried to be gentle. You tried to season your words with love. The word says too that, what is it? I'm going to butcher this, but a direct word spoken by a friend can be like an arrow, but it's good, but we speak in love and we speak in grace. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I do love that analogy. It's a lot better than my analogy of the plumbing. A lot better.
Well, I don't have any credit for it. You at least made yours up. Yeah, I learned the bridge from Pete and Charles.
That's, mm-hmm. And being direct is the right thing to do most of the time. But how you direct it is where the power comes.
The faithful wounds of a friend are better than the deceitful kisses of an enemy. That's what the word actually says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does. It does. Man, so tell me I want to hear a little bit about your story about adoption with your two sons. I find it beautiful because you had 4 daughters, and then the Lord put on your guys' heart to adopt 2 sons. I feel like somebody out there needs to hear this right now, and I want to.
If they made it this far in the podcast, hopefully they're still down for some more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I was praying about like what, we were talking about like what kind of man has God made you or me? And I look at people who do seem to have a better overall mapped out strategy for their life or whatever that's, and I do write, I shouldn't say like, I don't write things out, in some cases I go too far. I've got a whole health, vision, values, and strategy that's written out. The vision doesn't change. My body's a temple of God. And anyway, and then you got a strategy for staying healthy and it's all written out. Great. But in some other areas, it's just as it comes. Just listen to God. It's like the Nike didn't make up just do it. Mary did in John chapter 2, where she is at the wedding feast with Jesus and it's his first miracle. And she says, whatever Jesus said, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm just prefacing the adoption with this. To me, this whole story is more of just whatever Jesus says, just do it. We had never thought about adopting. My wife or I had never talked about it. If you'd asked me about adopting, I'd be like, well, there's like a bunch of commercials when I was a kid that were on TV for like foreign adoption, back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my view of like what adoption was. I didn't really know that many people that had adopted. And, or you get the, who's the singer that, for the pet adoption, in the eyes, what's that? Sarah McLachlan, in the eyes of the angel, far away. Yeah. So that was like our view of adoption. It was just, and all of a sudden, and this will be a little bit, I'll try to think of the right way to say this. A family member was pregnant and was thinking about having an abortion. And my wife called me. I was in Atlanta at the airport getting ready to come home. And my wife called me and said, hey, I just discovered this. And what do you want to do? Can we step in and help and offer to adopt this child to save this child, unborn baby, from being aborted? And I should have been the man that was like, yeah, but I'm like, well, let me call Pete for a second because this is a major decision.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I call Pete and it's like, well, it's quickly, I realize like, yeah, it's time to step up. And so I prayed with Renee. And in that moment, I felt like God was like, this is your child, Renee talks to the mom to be and says, hey, when Jason gets home, we'll come over, we'll talk through this. It can work out any way that you want. We're not going to put all these conditions and restraints on it. It's just, let's just try to keep in mind that there may be a way. By the time I get home, we go over there and the mom was not open to talking. Some other people in the family had kind of gotten to her and said, no, we're going down the path of abortion. Jason and Renee are nuts. They're these like fundamentalist Christians or it got really weird. All right. And, they had even planned that like we were going to try to intercept them on the way to the abortion clinic, which we were not planning and we did not do, but, she followed through with the abortion and we grieved and we're not victims, but because we had felt, and I still believe one day we'll get to heaven and that child will be there and we will embrace them. And that I know it sounds weird, but I feel like that child will say, daddy and mommy to us. Because we were willing to raise, it's not even just a child. That's a person, that's that person was going to have children themselves potentially someday and a whole, all of that. So anyway, so you're like, well, how did that lead to adoption? Well, we didn't adopt because the baby was aborted. But I think it just kind of like opened a little door, like the door was cracked in our hearts. So we weren't seeking anything out. Like a year later or so, and if Renee was here, she could kind of correct me on the timeline, but I'm in Houston, Texas now. I'm always gone somewhere. And I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm in an Uber, and I'm talking to the Uber driver who is saying that his two kids are now grown and out of the house, like just then, and he was excited to go travel the world and do all these things that he couldn't exactly do when he was raising kids. I was like, well, that's awesome, man. That's so cool. He sounded a little like tense still, though. I was like, well, you sound like something's wrong. And he says, yeah, well, my wife, you see, when she prays, things happen. And she's praying about adoption right now. And I'm scared that God's going to move on her heart to adopt or whatever. And I'm like, well, for some reason I had this sense. And this sense actually came again. This kind of a lot of this stuff goes back to Charles Simpson. He was saying, when God is in something and he opens the door, step into it, the room gets bigger. Mm-hmm. You see this limited view and this. So this guy was seeing like, I'm not going to be able to do all these things that I wanted to do if my wife wants to adopt and we have to like start over. And all I said is, hey, if God's in it though, and you go through the door, the room will get bigger. The Holy Spirit fell on the car. We didn't actually say anything for like 10 minutes. I mean, it was like you were on holy ground right now, even though the car was moving at 60 miles an hour down the highway in Houston, bringing me back to the woodlands in North Houston. And we started praying. Actually, he started praying, and it was amazing. And we've been texting. But I get back to the airport the next morning, and because it was late that night, I didn't call my wife. But I was so excited about what had happened. Like, this was crazy. I mean, it was palpable. And so I get to the airport, and I call Renee the next morning. Hey, you're not going to believe what happened. And she's like, well, wait, before you talk about that, I want to talk to you about something. Okay, fine. What do you want to talk about? She just says, I want to adopt. I'm like, whoa. Yeah, like, no, that's what I was telling him he should do. I'm thinking, but like in the moment, like I didn't play any funny games, like, ha ha ha, I just knew the Lord was speaking to us. And so I just went, okay. She's like, okay. Like, just okay. And I'm like, okay. See, what you didn't know was just God did this thing last night. And so I get it. Like, he's speaking. Mm-hmm. So one thing leads to another, and we start looking into adoption, and then we meet some more people who had fostered, and through the kids ministry at our church, kids club. And we just realized there's all these kids out there that need a home. And God's vision that he had put on our heart was really just be a family for someone who doesn't have a family. Mm-hmm. You can adopt, foster, do all this tactics, just be a family for someone who doesn't have a family. And so we fostered some children, and they went back to their families, and we eventually got the the boys that we have now, Michael and Tristan. Michael is 7 now, and Tristan is 4. When we got Michael, he was 2. And when we got Tristan, he had just been born, kind of emergency C-section from a drug overdose. And, so many crazy things have come from it. Let me just tell you real quick, the other thing that's like how God orchestrated all this is in 2009, I was flying back from Bogota, Colombia to go see what was happening through cell ministry down there, where hundreds of, 250,000 people in one church. You got a warehouse that can fit 10,000 people, and they're doing 25 services on a weekend. It makes our mega churches look like micro churches. So it's like, geez, it's crazy. And so Pete had asked if me and another guy from church, Seth, could go down there and check it out, come back and report back. Didn't give us a lot of instructions. So, so I get down there, I write 40 pages of notes. God's working on my heart. There's a night that we're worshiping God, one of the last nights, and I felt like God had said, just give it all. And so I reach in my pockets, I give all the money I've got, which we didn't have a lot of money at that time. We were kind of in a financial low spot. And then later on that night, there was a time of worship, and I was feeling this desire to hug somebody. Sounds a little touchy-feely, but, maybe I was 5 days away from my family and just feeling like I needed some physical affection. I don't know. But I would hold my daughter, who was getting ready to turn 1, Olivia. I would hold her a lot of times like this. And I don't know if you felt this with Axel, but like it just starts where you can't get close enough. Like if I could pull her into me, it wouldn't be close enough. I just love her so much. Mm-hmm. And it's that affection love that's just, it's all the love. And I started feeling this cave in my chest because she wasn't there. There was not everybody, my buddies next to me that were worshiping God, their hands were in the air, their eyes were closed. I didn't want to interrupt them. And all of a sudden, in a stadium full of 30,000 people during this time of worship, the pastor gets up and says, "Some of you just need a hug." What? And then he starts to speak, and he says, "You wonder why those who are supposed to love you hurt you." And again, I didn't get into everything here on the podcast, but some of that stuff I talked about earlier, like I had in an abusive relationship with my stepfather. He was supposed to love me, and he was beating me up, and all of a sudden my mind and my heart are just like, how are you speaking this, Lord, to me in the middle of 30,000 people? And then I realize there's about 15,000 of these 30,000 people that are wailing before the Lord. And I look down at the floor below me, and it's full of a puddle. I didn't even know I had been crying my eyes out before the Lord. And it's like, okay, you've got my attention, God. What is going on? And he says, I'm placing a mantle of faith upon you for your family. And what you get here, you're going to take back to them, and you're going to give to them. It'll be supernatural, just like that. And I was just totally full of the Spirit. It was just unreal. Real things happened there with faithfulness and the vision he gave me for family and everything. I'm in the plane ride on the way home. I'm flying from Bogota. I have to fly from Bogota to Miami to St. Louis. I forget which leg it was, but I was reading Psalm 37 that he will give you the desire. Verse 5, delight yourself in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. And of course, that means he will give you what your heart desires. But it also can mean, isn't it funny that one scripture can mean multiple things? It also means he'll give you the desires of your heart, the desires. So he can both shape your desire and fulfill your desire. See, we think he's going to fulfill the desires of your heart, but he can also shape the desires. And in that moment, when I was reading that scripture, he put a desire on my heart for a son. Mm. I had never had that before. I mean, I love my children. I love my daughters. I have 4 birth daughters, like you said. I had 2 at the time. And then now I have this burning desire to have a son, and not a desire to have a daughter, right? Then he gives me another daughter, and I love them. There was not a moment of disappointment. There was not a moment of frustration. It was always kind of just like, you're going to have to do it the way you want to do it, Lord. And I kind of got, I was like, we're not going to be having any more kids. So you're going to have to figure it out, God. After Claire, my fourth daughter, so we had Emma, Olivia, Charlotte, and Claire, 2012. So this was in 2009 that this happened. By 2012, I have a vasectomy. We're not having any more kids, man. So, Lord, you're going to have to figure this out. Is it going to be spiritual sons? Is it going to be my daughters are going to marry men and they're going to be like sons to me? I mean, I'm almost right now thinking it's all the above. But then the Lord provides these two boys to me through adoption. I had no idea it was going to happen. So, man, God can do anything. That's a long story. But since you asked it, that's pretty much the story.
It's all about listening.
Yeah.
It's all about listening to the desire He put on your heart.
He orchestrates it. He gives you desires. He fulfills those desires. He brings people into your life. It's super dynamic, and it's not very structured. Sometimes it's not. There's certain parts of our life that went perfectly according to plan, and others that He disrupted.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah,
you
appreciate you.
Bring so much value in so many ways to my life, and I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah. All right. Well,
love you, brother.
Next time.
All right.
All right. If you tuned in today, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and I hope that we're able to bring you value in multiple different areas of your life through the leaders that we bring on. So thank you for tuning in.